Hello, I'm Valerie Biden Owens, chair of the Biden Institute at the University of Delaware. Today, I have the privilege of introducing the Mayor of Providence, Rhode Island, Brett Smiley, who was sworn into office on January 2nd, 2023. Mayor Smiley is the 39th Mayor of Providence. Thank you, Mayor, for joining us on this episode of All Politics is Personal, a program where we introduce the public to the person behind the politician. We know anyone can research your policies and accomplishments, but that's not what we are here to talk about today. We're here to talk about you. So tell us, if you will, what was it like growing up Smiley?
Growing up, Smiley was a pretty good childhood. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. I was born in Ohio, but my dad got transferred to the big office in Chicago when I was little, and so I grew up in the suburbs. And it was a nice childhood. My folks got divorced when I was relatively young, which was not quite as common then as it is now. And so I think we were the first family on the block to have divorced parents, although certainly not the last. And so I grew up with my mom and my brother. It was the three of us. But it was a great childhood. My mom was a preschool teacher, and I went to great public schools. And my brother and I are night and day different. And so, we sort of got along, but we weren't running in the same circles.
What's the pecking order?
So I'm the younger of the two of us, although I behave like the older brother. And then my dad got remarried and had two more kids. So I have two half siblings. And now as adults, the four of us, even though we didn't grow up together, the four kids are actually quite close, which has honestly been one of the greatest joys in my life, is that the four siblings get along really well, even though there's 10, 15 years in between us, and we were raised in different households.
Your big brother?
Yes.
What's his name?
Adam.
Adam.
Yeah.
And I know what it's like. It's not easy raising an older brother.
Exactly.
I've had to do that. So God bless us. We're going straight to heaven. You know?
I mean, Adam was popular. He was a very talented athlete. He really didn't care very much about academics, and got in some trouble. Nothing permanent, but and I was the opposite. I was not an athlete. I was a very good student. I was not particularly popular, and so we ran in very different circles.
Did he manage your campaign for mayor?
No, he didn't. But in his own way, he protected me growing up. I say only partially tongue-in-cheek. He used to tell the other bullies in school, if anyone's going to beat Brett up, it's going to be me. Which sort of protected me from some bullying that I would have received otherwise as a nerd in school. But yes, he occasionally beat me up also. So.
Well, you said you were a good student, so I guess did you like school?
I loved school. Yeah.
What subject?
I liked most subjects, although maybe not surprisingly, I became deeply entrenched in the social studies department. I was sort of the mascot around there. And in high school, I was a runner. I still am a runner. So I would run track and cross country, and we usually would have workouts in the morning. So I'd get to school really early, have our workout, and then I'd hang out in the social studies department until school started, and kind of knew all the teachers and was sort of the teacher's pet in the social studies department.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. Yeah. Teacher's pet, class clown, athlete?
Teacher's pet for sure. Front row, always prepared, raised my hand a lot. Yeah, I think you get the picture.
Yeah,
right,
Catholic schoolgirl. Yeah,
right.
I know you didn't screw around with the nuns, and
right.
you unless you wanted your head cut off.
Yeah, ours was a good public school. It certainly wasn't that level of discipline, but I was a serious and good student.
Did you run for office when you were in high school?
I was in student government as a senior, and then my freshman year in college. Those were my only two student government years.
Where was college?
I started at Emory in Atlanta.
Oh, yeah.
And then ended up transferring to DePaul back home in Chicago.
Why?
So like a lot of kids of my type, which was, as I said, very studious, academically focused, somewhat sheltered. When I went away to school, I went a little nuts, and had never drank before, had never kind of had a social life like that before, and so my 1 year at Emory was the first and only time I ever got bad grades. I was missing class. I was
wild and crazy. Huh?
I was as wild and crazy as I get, but yes, and it was. I wasn't used to that freedom and liberation, and so I was at the end of my freshman year concerned that if I stuck it out at Emory, which is a great school, and I don't have any resentments against Emory, to be sure, it was me, that I might have been on the 5 or 6 year plan and not on the 4-year plan. So I transferred to DePaul, which was a little closer to home, and then sort of buckled down and got more serious.
Did your brother help you make that decision, or did you do it all by yourself?
No, I did it on my own, and honestly, DePaul ended up being a little bit of a sort of a by default choice, because I spent that summer after freshman year sort of hand-wringing about what I was going to do and where I was going to do it. And DePaul, one of the reasons I ended up at DePaul is because it had the latest application acceptance
Oh.
date for transfers, and they let me in, and I ended up getting an excellent education there. I proceeded to go to graduate school at DePaul also, and DePaul was it's very career focused, and there's a lot of working class or first generation college students. So everyone who was there
Was there for a reason?
they're there for a reason, and they wanted something that would help them get a good job. They were serious about their school, and it was a good fit for me.
When you were growing up, did your mom or dad have refrains that they would drill into you? You know, every like if you get knocked down, get up quickly, or your word is your bond. Did your parents in either household did they have a refrain other than your brother saying if anybody's going to beat him up, I'll beat him up? But
Exactly.
short of that,
No, they did, and it's funny. So my mother grew up in Texas, so I think hers are of more southern ilk, and my father grew up on the farm in Ohio, so his are more sort of
what kind of farm?
country wisdom. It was an apple orchard.
Oh,
My grandfather had an apple orchard. My grandfather had a couple of apple orchards, and so my dad's were more sort of folksy knowledge, and mostly passed down from my grandfather. So he used to say, if it's a good deal today, it'll be a good deal tomorrow, which was, don't rush into something. My grandfather had an expression which I love, and I still use, which is, just because you've bought and traded a horse doesn't make you a horse trader. Just because you've done something once doesn't make you an expert.
Yeah.
My mother has an expression that she still uses, which is everyone slices their pie a little differently, which is like, different people spend their money in different ways, and that's okay. Like, we all have different priorities. And then particularly growing up, my mother was big on, just because everyone else jumped off a bridge, does that mean that you need to also?
Valerie, just because every other girl does it doesn't mean you're going to do it. So you're not going. Yeah.
Exactly.
Your mother was practical.
She was, and she was raising 2 boys largely on her own, and made it work. But good practical advice.
Did you have traditions that on Sundays you all went to church together, or you had family dinners, or how did the two houses come together?
So, my brother and my mother and I ate dinner together almost every night. There was always dinner on the table. I laugh now because I married an Italian man, which obviously food's a big part of their culture. It was like more food than I'd ever seen. When I was growing up, if there were 3 of us at dinner, there were 3 pieces of chicken on the table, and that was it. Like, we never went hungry, but there wasn't these mounds of food that I ended up marrying into a family that I've experienced food in a very different way. The holidays were very important to my mother. Christmas and Easter were very important to my mother. Thanksgiving, and kind of all the holidays. And then my dad, holidays were less important. The families didn't really come together.
Did you live close together geographically?
Sometimes. My dad, for a period of time, worked in the DC area, and so that was sort of my high school years. But otherwise, he was generally in the same area, the Chicago suburbs. So we would see him, to be sure, but my primary holidays and almost all my meals were always at my mom's house.
Any grandparents?
So my dad's dad, the apple orchard owner, was the only grandparent that I remember. My dad's mom died when I was very young, and both of my mom's parents were deceased before I was born. And it's a great regret that I didn't, regret's not the right word. It's a source of sadness for me that I didn't get to meet my mom's parents.
Yeah, I didn't get to
her father.
My dad's parents. They were both died, and my mom's mom. Yeah. So I only had one grandparent, which is my grandfather.
So my grandfather had remarried, and there was a woman in his life who was a grandmother to me, and was a wonderful woman. but everyone had known my actual grandmother, and so she was always it was always a little bit different.
Okay, so you're a good kid. You studied hard in high school and then a year hiatus. Did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
I didn't.
Or do you know today what you want to be when you grow
Yeah,
up?
I mean, I didn't certainly growing up, and when I went to college, after I kind of got my act together, I ended up getting a finance degree and then proceeded to go get an MBA. Um, Largely because it was what my dad did, and it was sort of in the absence of a better plan. I think a lot of us default to what our parents do, and I think my career, my very early career steps, kind of demonstrate me figuring it out. My first job was as an accountant, which was a good job. I made a lot of money coming right out of school as compared to my peers, but I hated it. It was so boring, and it just so then I became a finance director for a nonprofit, for a domestic violence agency, actually. And it's like, this was the skill that I knew how to do, and I'm good with math and numbers, but at least it was helping people, it was doing something that I thought was making the world a better place. And that was a step in the right direction for me. And then a friend of mine ran for city council in Chicago for alderman. And it was just someone that I knew from the neighborhood, and he asked me to go volunteer for him.
So
And
that's your first political
that was my
experience?
first political experience, and that's where I sort of caught the bug and ended up finding my passion. But it wasn't at all because I had this plan, and it wasn't what I studied. I've never taken a political science class in my life, but I started volunteering on a campaign and
So that
got
flipped the
hooked.
switch.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Flipped the switch.
when did you run for office the first time?
In 2014, so I was 35 at the time, and had worked for uh, at the time, two previous mayors of Providence. It was an open seat.
I mean, how'd
And
you get to Providence from Chicago?
so after I started volunteering on that guy's campaign for alderman,
Yeah.
I dove head first into politics and worked a series of campaign jobs. Uh, One of the last of those jobs was I was in California on the governor's race, and then got an opportunity to be the campaign manager for the governor's race in Rhode Island, 2006. That's what brought me to Rhode Island. So I always kind of laugh that I took a 9-month job in Rhode Island 20 years ago,
And here you are.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
About a month after I arrived in Rhode Island, I met the man who's now my husband, and um, he was a community banker and on the campaign's finance committee.
Oh, so the campaign brought you together.
Yes, exactly. And
There's always romance in a
there is
campaign.
often
There,
romance.
and a marriage that ends up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. The Senator Boxer from California used to, at least by campaign lore, tell her campaign staff, "You can hook up, but you cannot break up,"
Oh.
which is to say, no drama on the campaign.
Yeah, yeah.
And so Jim and I started dating, and most native Rhode Islanders, the knock is that they don't usually leave, and it's a place where, and so when you marry a Rhode Islander, more often than not, you marry Rhode Island. And that certainly was my experience. So we lost that campaign. I stayed. A year later, we got married and have made my life in Providence, which has been the best decision I've made.
So, but how'd you get to where you are today, though, to being the mayor?
So the from 2001 to 2010, the mayor was a guy named David Cicilline, who's one of my political mentors, and I worked for him in his second term. And then in 2011 to 14 was a mayor named Angel Taveras, who I also had the opportunity to work for. He then ran for governor, so it was an open seat for mayor. And so, one of the things that you look at the alternatives and you ask yourself, do you have something different or better to offer? And I thought I did. And honestly, I had some feelings of self-doubt or insecurity, the chutzpah that it takes
Yeah.
for a 35-year-old to run for mayor. But I thought I had something different or better to offer. And so I threw my hat in the ring. It was a complicated election. We had a twice convicted former mayor
Yes, I've heard about him.
who was seeking to run one last time. And
Oh, isn't that interesting?
I thought he had a
Current.
very good chance of winning. And one of my opponents in the Democratic primary and I were sort of splitting up the good government vote. And so ultimately, I decided to drop out of that campaign,
Not
supported
to split the vote.
correct, to support my opponent to prevent what I thought would have been a colossal step backwards for our city. And ultimately, it worked. And the guy I endorsed and supported ended up winning. I went on to work for him. I served him for almost 2 years in City Hall, and then at the time, the governor of Rhode Island was a woman named Gina Raimondo, the current Commerce Secretary.
She's a great woman.
She's unbelievable, and she called me and asked if I'd like to be her chief of staff in the governor's office, which is sort of a generally I would think that that's a hard thing to say no to. And if you know anything about Gina
I
Raimondo,
do.
she's a very hard woman to say no to, and so those two things combined made it an impossible thing to say no to. So I went up as her chief of staff, ended up being her longest serving chief of staff in the state house. Uh, Transitioned to a new role as director of administration, which is kind of running state government and kind of like COO of the state. I did that for the last year, which was all through COVID. And then when she went to go serve the president, uh, that mayor that I had supported was term limited, and the campaign was starting. And so I threw my hat back in the ring again, ran a second time, and this time was able to win in another three-way Democratic primary, and now find myself a year and a half into my first term.
My brother has always said that the toughest job in the world is to be a mayor or the president of city council because everybody knows where you live.
Right,
They can come right up to your door
right.
and give you, and you're supposed to fix all their problems. What
And
was
that has happened to me.
what I was going to ask? What tell me some stories. I mean, what's the toughest thing you've had to do as mayor? Not I'm not asking the political part. I'm
Yeah.
the personal part.
I mean, so the first time I'll tell you the first time someone came to my door, because it does feel like a little bit of a violation to have someone knock on your door. I'm used to people coming up to me in the supermarket, out to dinner. First time someone came to the door uh, was last winter. We had a bout of extreme cold, and it was a Saturday morning. My doorbell rings. I got one of those Ring cameras so I can see who it is. I'm thinking, "Oh, I don't know this guy," um, but he doesn't look threatening, although that's probably famous last words. But the so I answer the door and he says, "Mayor, I'm so sorry to come to your house, but um, power's been out of my house for 12 hours. I'm afraid the pipes are going to burst." And amazingly, I've been able to get an electrician to come to my house, but the electrician can't call the power company, turn the power back on until a city inspector signs off on the work. And I can't get a city inspector on the phone at 10 a.m. on a Saturday morning. And I got a young baby and we can't do this another night. And so I said, okay, um, let me take all your information. I'll get back to you. So I called, I'm able to call people's cell phones, the power of the mayor's office. And we got a city inspector over there to get his power back on. And then realized that we had a real flaw in our process, which was there was no emergency after hours
Oh,
support for things like this. And it was my first winter in office. I wouldn't have known that otherwise. And so we fixed that problem. And so kind of scrambling that morning. And then people say, I can't believe someone came to your house. Well, this is the job that you sign up for. I mean, the nice thing about my background, I think, for me at least, is that I kind of knew exactly what I was getting myself into.
yeah.
There's no excuse for me not to know what I was
Having
getting
been
into.
chief of
Having
staff
having
for
worked for a
sure.
couple mayors and chief of staff to the governor, uh, fully expected this kind of thing, but it gave me a chance to actually help someone. And that's, I think it is a very difficult job in sort of public service. It was also really fulfilling. And because at a very practical person by person, I mean, the higher you get up, the scale gets bigger. Um, but this this resident, his wife and their child were able to sleep in their house that night and didn't have $10,000 worth of burst pipes because he came to my house and I was able to make a phone call.
That's what
Um,
politics is all about, isn't it?
that's the best, right?
Doing taking care of people, and that's
Exactly.
what. When you grew up, did we were Catholic school kids? My
Mm,
brothers, I have three brothers, and you went to public school. You said,
yes.
uh, did faith or religion play a role in your life to help mold who you are?
Uh, so my family's not religious. I was raised in the United Church of Christ, which are like liberal Protestants, and and I'm grateful. I live now in a very Catholic community, And I know some very devout Catholics for whom it's a source of great strength for them, but I also know some disaffected Catholics as well.
Oh, sure.
And I'm grateful because I really don't have any resentments against religion. I was raised in a church environment that was broadly open and accepting. I'm a gay man. I didn't figure that out until college years, but I had a lesbian youth minister when I was a kid, and it just for me it was a very welcoming environment that I do think ingrained in me at an early age some core tenets around morality and how to treat people and some kind of basic fundamental rules for life that are very much a part of me, but we're not a religious family.
We're a Catholic family, but we're not a, a pious
Mm,
Catholic family. I think it's just about your values.
right,
There, but for the grace of God, go I.
right,
It's the social doctrine,
right,
and that merged with my family's
right,
doctrine.
right.
So, Mayor, I'm going to ask you some rapid fire
I'm
questions.
ready.
Okay. One word to describe yourself.
Patient.
Oh, one favorite movie.
Anything Wes Anderson.
Favorite music.
Classical music.
Okay. Favorite food.
Pie.
Pie.
Pie. I'm a pie connoisseur.
What kind of pie?
Cherry's my favorite, but I like pretty much all pies. But we'll give you a detailed review of any slice of pie that I eat.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's your hidden talent?
Um, I'm actually quite handy.
If you had a superpower, what would it be?
See the future.
What's your birthday?
May 7th.
Oh, okay. So that makes you a Taurus.
It does.
What's your favorite vacation spot?
Montana.
If you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would you have dinner with?
My grandfather, my dad, my mom's dad, who I never had a chance to meet. He had an extraordinary life. He was a German Jew that family fled during the war,
Oh,
fought for the Americans before that, tried to fight for the French, got falsely imprisoned by the Vichy government. I mean, it's a movie of a life story, and my mother also describes him as a funny, charming, wonderful man, and I wish I had a chance to meet him.
as Tip O'Neill says, all politics is local. As we Biden say, all politics is personal. So thank you for sharing some of your personal story with us today.
It's great. I don't
nice
get a chance to
having
do that very often. It's
Thank you.
wonderful.
And thank you to our partners, the Stavros Niarchos Foundation. And remember, all politics is personal.